Okay, if everybody could take their seats, that would be greatly appreciated, and we can get started as soon as possible. I'd like to welcome everyone back to this final day of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum and this special panel on food security and transforming agriculture. I'm Andrea Sankey. I'm the host of the Newsmakers on TRT World. And I'd like to welcome my three panelists. I will introduce them in just a second. First, I'd like to give a brief synopsis, really, of what we're about to talk about. Because if anyone thought that the last few years were kind of the ultimate test for this generation of our global community, they're probably going to have to think again. Even as it seems the pandemic might be behind us, further and arguably even greater challenges have only just begun. With the conflict between Russia and Ukraine now expected to worsen, crucial energy and food supplies are now at risk. You know, through the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we as a global community had committed to ending hunger, ending food insecurity, and all forms of malnutrition. That goal of zero hunger, as you know, though, suffered a huge setback with the COVID-19 pandemic, and now there are grave concerns over how food supplies are going to be affected by this conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine is, of course, one of the world's biggest grain exporters, and it's looking increasingly likely that it will not be able to harvest its wheat crop this year. Plus, of course, the climate change issue. Extreme weather conditions are affecting agricultural production around the world, and its severity and its unpredictability could mean numerous disruptions to food production and to food distribution. So, how can we better deal with the challenges to our global food supply chain? Are there ways actually to preempt disruptions? Could perhaps digitalization and technology offer solutions and a way to engineer our way out of potential famine, as we did in agricultural revolutions before? And if we don't find a way, what will be the consequences? Well, let's see if we can answer some of those challenging questions. So here with me now to discuss food security and transforming agriculture, we have Fikrim Damka. He is the Minister of Regional Development of the Republic of Kosovo. Salman, a warm welcome. Salman Al-Farisi is the Secretary General of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And Dr. David Musabayana is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade of Zimbabwe. So great to have all three of you with us. And now the three of you are from entirely different regions of the world. But each of you has been carefully considering the challenges to your population's food security. So let's start with that. Tell us what you're up against right now, and we'll start with Kosovo. What you're up against in trying to ensure that your citizens are food secure.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrea. Teşekkür ederim. Konuşmama Türkçe devam edeceğim. Tabii gıda güvenliği veya tarımda dijital dönüşüme yönelik şu anda sadece Avrupa'nın değil ama dünyanın gündemine oturmuş ve çözülmesi gereken en önemli konulardan bir tanesi. Bunun çözülmesi için tabii ki adım atacak olan gelişmiş ülkeler olacaktır. Bir tanım var. Şöyle dünya 1996'da yapılan bir dünya forumu, gıda forumunda şöyle diyor. Gıda güvenliği tüm insanların aktif ve sağlıklı bir yaşam için beslenme ihtiyaçlarını ve beslenme tercihlerini karşılayan yeterli, güvenli ve besleyici gıdaya her zaman, bunun altını çizmek istiyorum, fiziksel ve ekonomik erişimi olduğunda ortaya çıkar. Yani bu tanımda şu en önemli husus bence. Fiziksel ve ekonomik erişim. Bu iki kelime aslında dünyada gıda güvenliği veya gıdadaki erişim noktasının önemli olduğunu ve bunu 96'da tanımlıyorlar ve hala günümüzde 2022'deyiz. Hala gıdadaki, dünyadaki erişim konusunu hem fiziksel olarak hem de ekonomik olarak ulaşamadığımızı görüyorum. Yani bunu pandemide de gördük. Ama pandemiden önce iklim değişiklikleri, çevre kirlilikleri vesaire etki ettiği bir gıdadaki bir güvensizlik var. Gıdadaki hem güvensizlik ama benim düşünceme göre belki dünyada öncelik olarak ki 96'da bunu tanımlamışlar ama ulaşımı fiziksel olarak gıdaya ulaşma imkanımız var mı? Varsa da ekonomik olarak alım gücümüz nerede? Yani belki buna odaklanmamız gerekiyor. Bugün hanımefendinin de ifade ettiği gibi yani bugün Ukrayna'da bile bir savaşın Avrupa'nın çok ülkesindeki gıdadaki yetersizliği, gıda üretimindeki yetersizliği ortaya koydu. 2 yıldır Covid'le mücadele ederken de gıdadaki eksikliklerin veya her ülke kendi kapasiteleri içerisine aldığında, kapattığında gelişmemiş olan ülkelerdeki sıkıntılar hemen ortaya çıktı, ortaya beliriverdi. Yani bunun önüne geçmek için belki eşit şekilde veya adaletli bir dağılımın her yönlü olması gerekir. Bunu en fazla gıdada hissediyoruz çünkü günlük yaşamımızda, günlük hayatımızda en fazla ihtiyaç duyduğumuz şey bu. Dolayısıyla bu tür gıda yetersizliği belki bütün dünyadaki olumsuzlukları da ortaya çıkartıyor. Aslında gıda güvenliği tarladan, bahçeden, soframıza kadar gıdanın güvenli bir şekilde yani gıdaya güvenerek öyle söyleyeyim almış olduğumuz sağlıklı yaşam için gerekli olan besin kaynağı. Ama bunu gördüğümüz ülkeler neler? Gelişmiş ülkeler. Yani gelişmiş ülkelerde bunu ön planda olduğunu ve tuttuğunu görebiliyoruz. Gelişmekte olan ülkelerdeki üretim dahil gelişmiş ülkelere giderken belirli bir standart seviyesinde gidiyor. Yani belirli bir standartizasyon içerisinde gidiyor. Dolayısıyla 2 veya 3 tabaka oluşuyor ister istemez dünyaya baktığımızda. Yani ben mesela Avrupa penceresinden konuşuyorum arkadaşlar. Değişik kıtalar için konuşacak ama Avrupa'da bile, Avrupa içerisindeki bile, yani Kosova veya Balkanlar ülkelerine baktığımızda bile hala gıda güvenliğinde bir sıkıntı yaşadığımızı görüyorum. Hala yeteri kadar bir kontrolün olmadığını, çünkü kontrolü sadece gıdanın oluştuğundan değil, gıdanın oluşum süreçlerinde de bu kontrolde eksik kalındığını görebiliyorum. Bunu belki gelişmiş ülkeler gübre kullanımından toprak analizlerine kadar her şeyi ön planda götürerek gıda güvenliğini sağlıyor ama hala Avrupa içerisinde Balkan ülkelerinde bile buna erişimin hala olmadığını görmek üzücü. Tabii ki bunun için her ülke kendi kapasitesi içerisinde çalışması gerekir ama bu yetmiyor. Çünkü her ülkenin de gıdaya göre üretimi elverişli olmayabilir. Dolayısıyla her ülke içerisindeki ve ülkeler arasındaki bu alışverişin bir güvenilir kaynağa dayandırılarak yapılması bence önümüzdeki süreçte önem arz edecektir. Ama bahsettiğiniz şekilde bile bugün Ukrayna'daki savaşın etkileri iç piyasadaki gıda tedarikine kadar etkilediğini görebiliyoruz. Yani bugün ülkeler yeteri kadar kendi kapasitelerini geliştirmediği takdirde en temel gıda, un, şeker, tuz vesaire de sıkıntı çektiğini görebiliyoruz. Ve bu savaş paniği de eklendiğinde gıdadaki bu istikrarsızlık ister istemez ortaya hemen çıkıyor.
Indeed. I'd like to pick up on some of the points you made in just a minute, but first I'd like to get the perspective of the Indian Ocean region from Salman Al-Farisi. Give it a try. I'm seeing a green light flashing. We might have to have a technical.
Yes,
There we
now.
go. Sounds good.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think thank you very much also to Minister Damka, who has eloquently spoke some views that I think most of them I can agree on. But you know, I agree with the need for the accessibility and affordability of the food. I think it's very important. So it means that we need to take into consideration on the skewing of the supply, and then we have also to have appropriate means of transportation to distribute the food to different part of the world. And indeed, the fair price of the food is also something that we have to consider. But the challenge would be still quite huge. In the over the coming decades, changing climates, growing global population, and then rising food prices and environment stresses will have a significant uncertain impact to the food security indeed. That's why I think food security is also a part of the adaptation to the climate change as well. Adaptation strategies and policy responses to global change, including option for handling water allocation, land use pattern, food trade, post-harvest food processing, as well as the food price and safety, as I said earlier, are urgently needed. Not to mention about the capacity of some developing countries, especially for the small island developing countries. Even sometimes their economic of scale is not quite fit with the fast production of food for their own purpose. At a time when the world population is growing and the availability of new arable land is shrinking, ensuring food and nutrition security in our greatest development challenge, and one that we must not to fail. But in our view, that food security is much more than an agriculture issue. It deserves action across government, from trade to competitiveness, to social protection, nutrition, and as well as the environmental action. This is why I'm pleased that we have some senior official here to discuss this issue. We need to do more from just fueling food security, just term of hunger as well. That we need to look at food and nutrition both in terms of hunger and malnutrition in all its form. But in order to create the condition for lasting food and nutrition security, our effort must be sustained economically, environmentally, and socially. So it's become our challenge of sustainable development is there. Agricultural business can offer pathway out of poverty, but for this to happen, the public and the private sector need to work together to support the smallholders. We require policies. We require indeed policies and programs that boost food producer incomes, connect them to market, and encourage them to produce higher value of more diversified food. Society at large will be stronger as a result, including in the situation of fragility, as I mentioned about the small island developing countries, conflict, as Minister Damka mentioned about these current issues, and violence, where agribusiness job and rural program can improve and social cohesion indeed. There is really a need to look at a cross-sectoral aspect. Nearly 2 years into the pandemic, we are still faced by a human tragedy, as we see now, and public health, humanitarian, and development emergency. That's why I think the combination of policies on many aspects of development is needed today, so we can have secured what we need in terms of the food supply, not really in the near future, but also in the long run. I think I will stop here, and then maybe we can discuss further.
Okay. Again, points I'd like to pick up on there, but first let's get the perspective from Southern Africa, and the minister from Zimbabwe, David Musabayana, joins us.
Thank you, Andrea. I will preface my discussions with the contemporary motto of the President of Turkey, where he said, "The world is bigger than 5." And my question is, does this only apply to the United Nations? Or we can also take it back home or into our continents and say, is there equal distribution of power, equal access to resources, equal distribution of income? Because as long as there is over-concentration of resources, power, or access to the means of production to the few, then our systems will never be sustainable. So, from a national perspective, as Zimbabwe, our government realized that, or our ruling party realized that, ZANU-PF, and they engaged or embarked on a land reform program where it ensured that the majority of the citizenry, the majority of the rural poor have access to land. This reversed the situation where, from a point where 5% of the population paid 95% of the taxes, which implied that the economy was owned by less than 5% of the population. Now we have an even distribution of access to the means of production. So this has transformed an economy which was food insecure over the years to an economy which is now into surplus. But before I zero in on that, I also want to point out that what I've seen with COVID in terms of decimating the global value chains and also the current disruptions that we foresee or are seeing in Russia and Ukraine food value chains is only an expose of how weak our global value chains are. It's the weakest link that has snapped. And what do we need to do? We need to focus on global or value chains that are resilient, sustainable, futuristic, and also that are feasible. Meaning also to say, even the proponents of globalization or specialization, our economists over the years, who have proved that specialization is sustainable, it works, have been challenged. Because in Africa, at the height and peak of COVID-19, we realized that because of our weak infrastructure, roads, and air network, it was difficult to get food, almost impossible, and food prices skyrocketed. So what is the answer? The answer is governments have to balance, have to ensure that we have diversity in terms of production. We're also saving for the rain day. As I work to close my discussion, it is also important for governments to empower its citizenry. Like in Zimbabwe, we've realized that our youths and our women were marginalized. They were secluded from the mainstream economy. So the government of President Idi Mnangagwa has set up a bank specifically for the youth, the Empowerment Bank, to ensure that our youths who are graduating from colleges and higher and tertiary institutions get access to loans and have startups. The President has also ensured that within the past 2 years, every higher and tertiary institution has an innovation hub so that our youth graduate or are incubated into entrepreneurship and they move forward. We have also reformed our education system from a 3.0 that was employee-oriented to an education system 5.0 that is an education system that empowers a child at an early age to realize that they can do their own business, also to understand the value system, the economic system of the world, so that we develop and empowered people. Our women were disadvantaged because of the racial system that we used to have. With the government has also set up a bank specifically for the women so that they have easier access and less restrictions when it comes to accessing those loans. And what has happened? The past 2 years, we have had a glut in our country. Last year alone, we had 2.7 million tons of grains. But 2 years back, we were food insufficient. This year, as if our president had prophesied that we are going to have such conflicts that would disrupt global value chains, the president embarked on a government and private sector partnership where banks were guaranteed or given guarantees to fund value chain for wheat production. We used to import 80% of our wheat from Ukraine, Russia, and Argentina. But this last season, we have more than 200 metric tons of wheat, and we are self-sufficient for this year. So I think government has to move in to create an enabling environment and crowd in private sector so that economies are self-sustainable. However, as a government, we have had serious challenges which were underpinned by Alena Dohan, UN Special Envoy on unilateral coercive measures. We have realized that Zimbabwe's economy is under serious stress because of many challenges where some Western countries have imposed illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe because we redistributed land, which was a mere implementation of Lancaster House Conference of 21st December 1979. Ms. Hala Ilva, the UN Special Rapporteur on Rights for Food, has also said the illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe must be removed immediately because they are actually creating food insecurity to the extent that the system has exposed more than 7 million people on food insecurity. So I believe we need to have a system thinking approach to the issue of food security to come up with a transformative agenda which should not just end as blueprints, but we must be action-oriented as government to ensure that we are food secure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Needless to say, Zimbabwe really has taken a unique path in looking to shore up its food security. But I have to say, and I don't want to overstate this, there seems to be some contradictions in perspectives according to different regions. While Zimbabwe does stress being completely self-sufficient and has for many years, Zimbabwe used to be considered the breadbasket of Africa. There used to be heavy exports, and Zimbabwe later became a state that wanted to take care of itself. And perhaps looking at the context of today, rightly so. But there are challenges to that, especially when we look at climate change. And if Zimbabwe is looking at shoring up its own production, and should another extreme drought or other conditions hit that again put that food production at risk, then you're going to have to look outside, again, for help from the international community to provide that food security. And I want to go back to Kosovo on this because you had spoken about how developed countries need to take steps to ensure that food supply is secure for less developed countries. The problem with that, as we all know, and as we saw during the pandemic, the world took on an every man for himself kind of attitude. We saw it in vaccine hoarding, for example. And I think that might be our fear moving forward, is that when it comes to food security issues, and when it comes to crunch time, should these conflicts persist between Russia and Ukraine, for example, climate change takes an even heavier toll than it has already, what will countries like Kosovo have to do to preempt any food security potential disasters and have to innovate to make sure that your population is taken care of when nobody else will want to help their counterparts?
Teşekkür ederim. Aslında bir atasözü var zannedersem. Bir musibet bir nasihatten bedeldir. Bazen bir musibet başımıza geldiğinde buradan ders çıkarmaya çalışırız. Yani bu her ülke için geçerli, Kosova için de geçerli. Aslında Kosova genç bir ülke olması sebebiyle yani 14. bağımsızlık yılını 17 Şubat'ta kutladık. Dolayısıyla biz yeni bir ülke olduğumuz için yeniden tarımdaki reformları, tarım arazilerin yeniden teknolojiyle buluşturulması ve üretime dönük subvanse edeceğimiz temel gıdalar üzerine hükümet olarak duruyoruz. Ve her geçen yıl tarım bütçesini 2'şer kat arttırarak yeterlilik, yani Kosova'daki nüfusumuza yeterli seviyede gıda tedarikinin sağlanmasını amaçlıyoruz. Tabii ki Kosova küçük bir ülke ve birçok ülkeyle sınır olan ama işte eski Yugoslavya'da tek bir ülke olması akabıyla bu ülkeler şimdi eski cumhuriyetler birbiriyle bağlı ve birbiriyle alışveriş yapan ülkelerdi. Bölgelerdi daha doğrusu. Şimdi ise ülkeler. Bizim ortak pazar dediğimiz SEFTA üyesiyiz. Dolayısıyla pazar içerisinde, yani küçük ülke olma akabıyla birbirimize bağlı olmamız sebebiyle gümrüksüz bir tedarik zincirimiz mevcut. Fakat söylediğiniz şekliyle pandemide ilaç bile verilmez iken bir ülke başka bir ülkeye gıdayı hiç vermedi. Dolayısıyla şunu ortaya çıkardı. Her ülke kendi geleceğini gıda üzerine düşünmek zorunda. Bunu yapması için de tarıma yönelmek zorunda. Tarıma yönelmek için de, ki genç nüfus buna sıcak bakmıyor, genç nüfusu teşvik etmek lazım. Yani maalesef tarım arazilerinin kötü yönetiminden ve tarım işiyle, hayvancılık ve tarım işiyle genç nüfusun ilgisinin olmayışından bu sürdürülebilir bir tarım kalkınmasının olmadığını ortaya çıkartıyor. Bunu düşünmeye bizi itti. Dolayısıyla Zimbabwe'nin Dışişleri Bakanı dediği gibi startup dediğimiz veya kendi işletmelerini yaratacak hem teknolojik alanda hem de tarımsal alanda gençlerimizin bunun teşvik edilmesi gerekiyor. Yani tarımda bunun ileriye doğru taşınması için teşvik edilmesi gerekiyor ama gelişmiş ülkelerin gelişmekte olan ülkelere bazen ihtiyaç duyduğunu da görebiliyoruz. Bugün Ukrayna, Avrupa'nın veya işte Afrika'nın veya bizim belirli gıdalarda ambarı olduğunu veya GDO'dan arındırılmış bir şekilde Bulgaristan'daki piyasaların veya tarım arazilerinin Avrupa tarafından subvanse edildiği ve kullanıldığını göz önünde bulundurduğumuzda Avrupa'da bile gıdadaki yeterlilik seviyesinin olmadığını görüyoruz. Yani sadece gelişmekte olan ülkelerde değil ama Avrupa'da da genç nüfusun tarımla uğraşmadığı, hayvancılıkla uğraşmadığını istatistikler gösteriyor. Dolayısıyla bunu telafi edecek, teknolojik destekle telafi edilecek bir gıda üretimi var, bir tarımsal üretim var. Aslında belki bu pandemi de maalesef ortaya çıktı. Küçük tarımsal işletmelerin piyasada yer alamadığını ve işçi ve insan kısıtlamaların olduğu süreç içerisinde tarım işletmelerin kendi pazarını yaratamadığını ve tedarik zincirinde iç piyasada bile eksiklik olduğunu bu ortaya çıktı. Bunu da ortadan kaldırmak için belki bunun da altyapısını her ülke düşünmesi gerekiyor. Çünkü bu 2 yıl pandemiyle boğuştuk. Şu anda hiç kimse önümüzdeki dönemde başka bir bulaşıcı hastalık çıkar mı, çıkmaz mı sorusuyla karşı karşıya. Olasılık. Bunun da önüne belki şimdi bu ileriki doğru düşünmemiz gereken olaylar ortaya çıkardı ve hem hükümetler hem sivil toplum kuruluşları hem üniversiteler hem bilim insanları bunun üzerine artık yoğunlaşması gerekiyor. Yani bir bulaşıcı hastalıklar haritası çıkarılması gerekebilir. Ya ileride olur mu olur. Yani hiç kimse 2 yıl önce böyle bir pandemi olacağını düşünmez iken artık ileriye doğru bu tür bulaşıcı hastalıkların da ortaya çıkabileceği ve devletlerin buna hazırlıklı olması gerektiğine inanıyorum. Yani bu hem gıdadaki güvenlik hem gıdanın güveniliği hem tedariki açısından hem de yeterlilik açısından. Ben inanıyorum ki ülkeler yeniden bu konuyu kendi ülkeleri içerisinde şekillendirecek, kendine yeterlilik seviyesine ulaşıncaya kadar gıda üretimini ortaya koyması lazım, daha doğrusu düşünmesi lazım. Elbette ki ülkeler birbiriyle gıda üretiminde alışverişini artırması gerekiyor. Bu savaş dahi olsa, pandemi dahi olsa, başka bulaşıcı hastalıklar dahi gelse bile birbiriyle bu gıda alışverişini aksatmaması lazım. Yani zincirin kopmaması gerekiyor. Ama elbette Kosova gibi küçük ülke olmamıza rağmen tarımsal alanlarımızın reform şeklinde ve sübvanse edecek şekilde ileriye doğru hazırladığımızı söyleyebilirim.
You made several fantastic points, but one in particular I'm wondering about, and actually I'd like to point this to the Indian Ocean region, because you're looking at a large-scale shift here that might need to take place. Do we actually need to see a global shift toward incentivizing agricultural work? Have we undervalued farming, for example, so much in the past few decades, and now we're seeing that manifest in a dangerous way? And will the Indian Ocean region in particular try to re-incentivize agriculture and also incorporate the technical transition we were talking about, the digitalization perhaps of farming, in order to better coordinate efforts regionally and globally toward food security?
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think I can agree both Minister Bramka and Minister Busabayana when he talked about the participation of young generation in the agriculture activities. Yes, I think this is very important. And then, as you mentioned also about the digitalization, then digitalization is part of the answer to address the food security. Just an illustration. I've been in Mauritius. I live there. I've been about 2 months there. What struck me, what surprised me, that the island were surrounded by ocean. We found that the price of fish is very expensive. Yeah, because it is about productivity. It is about distribution. It is about a willingness of the population to produce more for their own purpose. And then and Mauritius is a tourism a country with destination for good destination for tourists. That's why the need for fish is very important for them. And then at the same time, in Indonesia, we find some young generation developing application for the aquaculture. As organization of intergovernmental in nature, I think this is a time for us to pull that capacity to secure the food availability in the region. So I think it's very important. That's why IORA, with the 23 members across from Africa to Australia, and then with the dialogue partners of 10 dialogue partners, I think IORA is very strong because 5 members of the Security Council part of the family. And that's why I think we can pool the resources, we can pool the capacity to develop our effort for the food security. In IORA, our 6 priority area are on the fisheries management. We also talk about the trade and investment. So trade facilitation is very important. I think the 2 ministers also talk about that. We have, in Africa now, we have the continental free trade area. In Asia, we have so many trade arrangements. If we can not maybe combine, because technically maybe very, very difficult, but we can have the synergy of that trade arrangement, then we can facilitate something which is important for the region, I believe. And then we have also talking about the marine safety and security, because we need the means of transportation for the food to come to the population in need of that food indeed. So that's all that we can do as an organization. Indeed, we can facilitate that kind of cooperation. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Okay. Minister Musabayana, I'd like to come back to some of the points you made. I mean, Zimbabwe is a country that I must say, unlike many others, holds its land very dear. I'm not sure you're going to face the same challenges as other countries in a youth population that is not interested in farming. Because Zimbabweans do, from my experience, do truly love their land and they value farming in a way many of their counterparts do not. Still though, you know, in dealing with instability caused by various factors over the past decades, Zimbabwe has had to manage sometimes very drastic cuts in food production. So I'd like you to tell us how that has been handled. And have you been overall satisfied with Zimbabwe's food security management? Have you learned perhaps some lessons that you'll be able to apply in the future? And you know, what kind of further innovation would you like to see now to make sure that Zimbabwe can be self-sufficient in times of crisis, not just from the outside in, but with climate change domestically?
Thank you, Andreas. I'm glad you have actually raised a question which is one of the contemporary issues on debate in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, like you rightly said, we hold our land dearly, and we've gone through a very successful land reform. So what we've done is we've realized that land does not continue to expand. The population is expanding. Like I've said, by 2050, the globe will be about 10 billion people. And the system that we currently have may not be able to sustain it. So as Zimbabwe, we've realized that what we need to move on to now is efficiency and effectiveness in the management of land. So we have marshaled resources and also ensure that our young population, our youth and our women who are closer to the land have an orientation of understanding the economics of land. So what I've done is, instead of fighting social media, instead of fighting ICT, we have underlined the opportunities offered by social media, or I said ICT, the big data and the algorithms that comes with it. We have ensured that our young people ride on it. So we are now using the bulk SMS to disseminate information to our peasant farmers, our rural farmers, so that they know, or they work with the full consciousness of what's going to happen in terms of the weather. They also have technical know-how and assistance through the SMSs. We actually have our extension workers now using social media to disseminate, to educate, and to publish or advertise or promote or create advocates for certain practices of farming. The latest one that we've been promoting is Pumbuza, is climate proofing method of farming where you use mulching and other scientific methods to work and be able to harvest with very minimal rainfall. That has worked very well. The issue of efficiency, post-harvest losses. We've also realized that we had challenges with harvesting and post-harvest losses. And we've used technology and dissemination of information through ICT so that our farmers are fully conscious. And also the general efficiency in the consumption of food is also important. I know the President Xi Jinping of China launched the empty plate operation, which ensured that people don't waste food. In Zimbabwe, we are doing the same, but we are doing it through advocacy and writing on social media. In Zimbabwe, our youth are also very hungry for land. And the government, through our President Idi Mnangagwa, has launched the farms where we have, every province has been given a farm, where the youth come together, work together, they are incubated, they are trained on how to farm effectively. So it's a process where you walk through the entrepreneurial farmer so that they get to understand how to farm. So it has also worked very well. So largely, we are working on climate proofing. This is why we said my government has now launched a program where every year 100 hectares, additional 100 hectares of land are put under irrigation to ensure that we climate proof. I thank you.
Just very quickly, I mean, I appreciate you bringing up the point, the fact that there is still so much excess consumption in certain parts of the world, while there is dramatically less in other parts, and that the fact that consumption and food waste needs to be brought better under control. That's a big job for the developed world in particular, when people are used to being rather spoiled with what they're allowed to consume. But very, very quickly, we just have a few minutes before I want to turn it over to the audience. I'd just like to ask you if Zimbabwe is interested in returning to becoming, you know, the breadbasket of Africa as it once was before. And is your land redistribution program putting Zimbabwe on the path to do that?
Thank you, Andreas. Zimbabwe is well on course, under the first part, is well on course in reclaiming or even surpassing being the breadbasket of Southern Africa. Like I said, just last year, we had more than 2.7 million metric tons of grain, white corn, in our silos. And also, we also managed to have a lot of small grains that we've also started producing. Like I said, in wheat, we also had we are close to self-sufficiency now. Meaning to say, with a cumulative effect, the next 2-3 seasons, all things being equal, we should be able to start to export grain. It's just that this year, we're working on our strategic grain. But going further, in terms of the land reform, it was a huge success. Why I say our land reform program was a huge success is because if we look at the production levels of 1999, before the land reform, tobacco, for example, in 1999, the production of tobacco, which was the highest export earner then, had 193 million metric tons of flue-cured tobacco. But last year, or the last 3 seasons, we have been surpassing 240 million metric tons. At its lowest, in 2009, we had 57 million metric tons. And everyone now saying Zimbabwe's land reform has failed. But we managed to reorganize, re-engineer, and rethink the process and create new markets. Now we are more than 240 million metric tons per annum. So the same has happened to our floriculture and also our horticulture. You go through the Dubais, most of the blueberries that you find there are now from Zimbabwe. Go to Netherlands. They are now importing most of our avocado pears. We have, last week, a few weeks ago, we have managed to break into the Chinese market where we are going to be selling our citrus. We had challenges with the cold chain. We put it in place. Now we'll be exporting our citrus crops. So in terms of the land reform, it's a huge success. The challenge that we have now is almost everyone in Zimbabwe wants to be a farmer. Even our diasporans, they want to be farmers. So that's the challenge that we have, where everyone wants to be a farmer, the executive, the CEO, and everyone else wants to be a farmer, the engineers. So it was a huge success, and it should be a lesson to the rest of the world. I thank you.
Okay. I'd like to open up. Do you have a comment? Go ahead. Okay. I'd like to open up to the audience, open it up to the audience then for questions. There's a microphone somewhere, we hope. If not, if you can stand up maybe here and make your voice heard. Oh, there's a microphone there. My apologies. Go ahead, take a stand.
Hi all. Oğuz Erşamlı, Boğaziçi University. I'd like to ask my question in Turkish to Mr. Danka. Hoş geldiniz. Öncelikle tarım deyince tabii tek bir tarım yok. Hayvancılık var, bitkisel tarım var. Özellikle hayvancılığa baktığımızda büyük bir alan kaybı, su kaybı, aslında daha verimli kullanılabilecek, bitkisel tarımda daha verimli kullanabilecek, yani birim alanda ve birim kişiye daha fazla kalori düşürebilecek bir pratik geliştirebiliriz. Şu anda da hayvansal ürünlerin tüketimine bakarsak, et özellikle, Avrupa'nın, ABD'nin, Latin Amerika ülkelerinin ve Avustralya'nın çok tükettiğini, Afrika'nın ve Asya ülkelerinin ise neredeyse hiç tüketmediğini görüyoruz. Yani aslında et ürünleri ve hayvancılık ürünleri zaten halihazırda ayrıcalıklı kişilerin alabildiği ve herkesin ulaşamadığı gıdalar olmuş durumda. Burada da bir gıda adaletsizliği mevcut. Aynı zamanda dediğim gibi hayvancılığın sürdürülebilirlik problemi de var. Siz küçük, yani yüz ölçümü olarak ve kaynaklar olarak, görece olarak küçük bir ülkenin vatandaşı olarak diyeyim, bireysel, ulusal ve bölgesel olarak daha bitki bazlı bir diyete geçiş, böyle bir pratiğe geçiş vizyonunuz ve düşünceniz var mı? Teşekkür ederim.
Great question.
Çok teşekkür ederim. Bu alışkanlıklarla alakalı. Yani insanları eğer yıllarca belirli bir alışkanlıkta yeme modeli var ise bunu değiştirmek biraz zor oluyor. Belki genç nesil üzerine belki çalışılabilir bu konuda ama dediğim şekliyle insanların bir yemek alışkanlıkları var ve o yeme alışkanlıkları elbette ki o ülkedeki ürünlerle alakalıdır. Yani hayvancılığın çok az gelişmiş olan bir yerde çok et tüketimini beklemek mümkün değildir. Veya tam tersi olabilir. Çok tahıl üretilen bir ülkede çok hayvancılık ya da et tüketimini beklemek doğal değil. O bölgedeki hayvancılığın çok gelişmiş olması sebebiyledir bu. Ve bunu değiştirmeye yönelik belki zaman alacaktır. Elbette ki bu konu üzerine çalışmalar var ama tahıl üretimle ilgili de arazilerin ve iklim şartlarına bakmak lazım. Yani bizim için bu elverişli mi? Kosova gibi bir bölgede evet tahıl üretiminden mevcut ama tahıl üretiminden ziyade dağlık kesimin olması ve çok fazla otlak alanların, arazilerin olması sebebiyle hayvancılık üretimi yani et üretimi daha ön planda. Ama ilginç olan şu var ki et üretimi dediğimizde kırmızı et üretiminden bahsediyoruz ama beyaz et üretiminde sıkıntı var. Bu Avrupa'da da bu sıkıntı var. Çoğu ülkede sıkıntı var. Yani bir Latin Amerika'dan, Brezilya'dan Avrupa'ya veya Kosova'ya beyaz etin gelmesi düşündürücüdür. Yani bu herkesi düşündürmek zorundadır. Yani yerli üreticileri de düşündürmek zorunda. Çünkü bu beyaz et tüketimine yönelik belki çalışmaları hızlandırmamız gerekiyor ki bu konuda çalışmalarımız var. Sadece tavukçuluk veya beyaz et üretiminin fabrikasyona geçiş esnasında Avrupa fonlarından faydalanarak bu süreci başlatmışız. Teşekkür ederim.
My apologies. Next question. Walk on up to the microphone, and we'll take people one at a time. So you can speed up there as eager as you might be, and we'll try to get everyone's questions in. Yeah, do stand behind each other, and then we can make sure everyone gets their turn. Great, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Defne Seymen. I'm from Özyeğin University, and I would like to address my question to David Misabayana. My question is, you have mentioned some of the challenges that you faced, like the infrastructure. And I wonder, do you believe that it is also the rest of the world's responsibility to help such countries to develop their infrastructure and make the food secure? Or would you consider such an aid as intervention, and would you consider it as a form of imperialism? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arias. I want to thank Daphne for such a question. It's an important question. Zimbabwe, yes, has challenges in infrastructure development. And the challenge to its infrastructure development has been largely to do with the economic sanctions that have been illegal and unreasonable that have been imposed on Zimbabwe. To the extent that these sanctions are just like any other foreign invasion that has happened the world over, where another nation is being aggressive on us, or other nations are being aggressive on us. What has happened is that Zimbabwe has been blocked for almost a quarter of a century. We have been blocked from accessing international capital, credit lines. We have no access to the World Bank or any other forums where we can get money for infrastructure development. Only just last year is when the IMF started coming up and gave us SDRs to the tune of $1 billion. So over the years, we've never had any access or assistance from other countries or from those institutions that normally assist in infrastructure development. But as a government, my president's motto is, or philosophy is, Zimbabwe is open for business. And we are engaging the rest of the world in his policy of engagement and re-engagement, where we are reaching out, even those nations that have imposed illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe. We have created a platform for dialogue so that we start to have access to infrastructure. The infrastructure that we have challenged with is energy and power infrastructure, because the hydroelectric power that we use is affected or is vulnerable to the vagaries of weather. When we have weather challenges in the north of our country, then we don't have enough generation capacity for our electricity. We have the Wange Thermal Power Station, the major producer of our power. It's got 8 furnaces, and most of them have passed their economic life. But because of economic sanctions, we have not been able to put up new infrastructure. So Zimbabwe is open for business. We don't take it as imperialism for other countries to come or bring in capital, whether it's grants or as loans or as DOTs or BOOTs or any other form of partnership. So we are open to business, and we can accept any form of partnership in infrastructure development. I submit.
Okay, next question.
My question was directed to the Kırım'danka, and I'm going to speak in Turkish. Ben Fatma Yaraşçı, Antalya Bilim Üniversitesi'nden geliyorum. Siyaset bilimi, uluslararası ilişkiler ve hukuk bölümü okuyorum. Ama bir çiftçi olarak sorumu yöneltmek istiyorum. Gelişmemiş ve gelişmekte olan ülkelerin piyasada yer almak için tekelleşen tohum standartına uymaları gerekiyor söylediğiniz gibi.
Ancak bu ithal tohumlar hem bitki hem de hayvan sektörü için konuşuyorum. İlacı ve gübresinin de alınması gereken tohumlar. Yani hastalanmayan tohum yok ithal olduğunda. Bu bir gerçek ve gelişmiş ülkelerin gıdasına ve ilaç sektörüne bağlı kalıyoruz. Gelişmemiş ve gelişmekte olan ülke olarak. Buna hem devlet gözünden hem de gençlerin teşviki açısından nasıl bir çözümle hareket etmek gerekir alternatif olarak bunu sormak istiyorum.
Çok teşekkür ederim Fatma Hanım. Gerçekten güzel hem siyaset okuyup hem de çiftçiyle uğraşmak, yani tarımla uğraşmak. Bizim umut gençlerin artık bu alana yönelmesi gerektiğine işaret ediyorsunuz. Sizi tebrik ediyorum. Tabii aslında bugün dünyada gıda problemi var ise bu bazı ülkelerin bencil davranmasından geliyor. Özellikle gelişmiş ülkelerin bencil hareketlerinden ortaya çıkıyor. Ve her şeyi kendine has, kendini korumaya yönelik, sanki dünyada bir tek bunlar var, diğerleri 2. ve 3. sınıf vatandaş. Onlara güzel avokado üretecek, onların istediği standartta avokado üretecek, onların istediği standartta gıda üretecek, onların istediği ve onların vermiş olduğu tohum ve gübreyi kullanarak onlara üretim yapmamız gerektiği apaçık ortada. Bu Zimbabwe için de geçerli, diğer ülkeler için de geçerli. Maalesef Avrupa belirli bir standartizasyonu ortaya koyarak kendi kapılarını güvensiz gıda dediği veya kendi milletine ve kendi insanına sadece güvenli gıda yedirmeye yönelik politikaları belli bir zaman sonra işe yaramadığını görecek ve daha çemberi daha bir halka daha genişletmek için uğraş verecektir. Çünkü olması gerekir. Belirli bir zaman sonra artık bu üretime erişmesi onların da olmayacaktır. Çünkü kendi üretiminden ziyade düşük maliyetli ülkelerde üretim yaparak yüksek maliyetli fiyatlar şirketler satmayı hedefliyorlar. Bunun önüne geçmek için herkes kendi tohumunu yetiştirmek zorunda. Zor bir iş. Buna asla ve asla İsrail gibi ülke müsaade etmeyecektir. Başka ülkeler de müsaade etmeyecektir. Bugün herhangi bir domates tohumunu almaya kalksanız inanın 1 kilo altından daha pahalı. Çok daha pahalı ve bir kere üretiyorsunuz. Bir kere kullanabiliyorsunuz. Bunu bir kez daha tohum geliştirmek, kendinizin bunu geliştirmeniz imkansız. Öyle geliştirmiş ki sadece tek bir seferlik kullanabiliyorsunuz. Bunu iyi, kaliteli bir ürün elde etmen için de yine aynı ülkenin veya gelişmiş ülkelerin de ilacını kullanmak zorundasınız. Aksi takdirde tohum bir işe yaramıyor. Yani bu sektör aslında biz fiiliyatta ülkeleri fiziksel olarak işgal etmese de yani bir tür sömürgecilik var aslında. Yani bu gıdada da var, her alanda da var. Yani kendini bir set çıkararak onun istediği şekilde hareket etmek zorundasın. Aksi takdirde sen de domates yemeyeceksin. Yapmamız gereken, eminim ki Türkiye bunu yapıyor ama bizlerin de yapmamız gereken kendi tohumumuzu geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. Kendi gübremizi de geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. Ne zamana kadar? Hızlı hareket etmemiz gerekiyor. Çünkü toprak zaten zehirleniyor. Toprak bu gübreye alıştıktan sonra sen istediğin kadar tohum yetiştir, istediğin kadar gübre yetiştir, verim alamayacaksın. Verim almadığın yerde zaten geleceği de yok. Teşekkür ederim.
Hi, my name is Gamze Kandemir. I'm coming from the same university as Fatma. I study economics. I'm doing double major in political science and international relations and a minor in business administration. I actually had 4 questions, but my friend helped me with the broad questions she had on Mr. Damka. with his broader answer. But still, I want to address the same questions in case Mr. Al-Farisi and Musa Bayana would like to add anything or contribute. My first two questions were about the injustice measures of World Trade Organization and the non-inclusiveness of agricultural products and the non-tariff barriers, as you mentioned, Mr. Damka, that the developed countries are putting in just for circumventing the agricultural, the countries that are mainly generating their GDP from agricultural products to have such non-tariff barrier clashes or challenges. And the second question was about the monopolization in the field of seed and fertilizers, chemicals of agriculture. So even after the Green Revolution, we saw that after mass production and unconscious production, our soils have been, as you said, poisoned, because even from the case of my mom's village, there was an American investor in the year of 90s who came just with the fertilizers, and unconsciously, because the farmers were also unconscious, so he just stayed there for 2 years and he invested. He just cultivated potatoes in bulk and then left the village. So thank you for the broad answer you gave, and you touched upon this problem. My other two questions were...
you know what, your questions are going to have to be the last. We're already over time. So if we can let the Minister answer your first two questions, and we'll see where we go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Minister, Mr. Damka.
Okay, sir.
To all of you.
Thank you very much, Kamsa from Antalya University. I think you just touched on the right time that I think we need WTO to be more fair, especially when we see some small island developing countries. Sometimes they are not. This is not about production, but sometimes it is about the capacity or on the how to manage the economic capacity related to the economic scale. When they have a very small arable lands, and then they have a very small capacity of intensify their product, then that is the problem. So, but at the same time, there are some tariff on many things which I think we need to be fair. And then you mentioned about the research. I think Minister Damkar also talk about the research. I think the research and development in developing countries should be given priority right now to support the food security. Yesterday I was in bilateral talk with Deputy Minister Farouk of Turkey, and then he mentioned about the availability of technology by the UN Technology Bank, which is free of charge in terms of for the developing countries. I think this is part of that cooperation that we can promote in the near future. Thank you very much.
Shall I ask my other two questions?
Sure. Go
Okay,
ahead. Or unless our other panelists would like to address the others.
Okay, my next two questions are especially addressed to Mr. Musa Bayana and Al-Farisi. Second point I want to touch upon is the biopiracy problem, especially by the big companies. For instance, I read a book of Vandana Shiva. She's really combating with this issue. So if we go from the case of Indonesia, for instance, there are more than 3,000 types of rice, right? But these companies are taking the patents of these natural endemic rices, but you as a country have to pay for the patent that is actually endemic and special to your region. So about the case of biopiracy, I would like to take your advices or ideas, and especially to you, Mr. Musa Bayana, my second question. We talked about the land redistribution applications in your country, and Ms. Andrea has stated that your country's people love their land, so you don't have this problem. But I believe the challenge of this decade is climate change, because there's increasing climate change migration, especially when the crop yield efficiency is decreasing. So in that case, what is your state agenda and your policy implications to cope with this problem? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the last. In our case, like I said, there is so much appetite and hunger for land. Our problem is not people running away from the farms and going away. We actually have people moving from towns into the rural communities. So what we have done is the government has come up with a program of value addition, beneficiation, and we are adopting a concept where we are saying a factory on every district, where we are focusing on rural industrialization. That is going to deal with migration issues and deal with issues to do with overpopulation. Embracing ICT, creating markets, farmers' markets, is also created a platform that ensures that farmers maximize on their production, they get the best prices or optimal prices or viable prices on their prices. Government has also put in place interventions where they think markets alone cannot stand or may fail. So that is sustained, will sustain us into the future. Also, the deployment of resources on agriculture, on irrigation, so that we mitigate the vagaries of climate change. That has helped a lot in that area. I also just want to comment on some of the questions that you've raised on WTO, on issues around barriers, non-tariff barriers. My comment is that in reality, you can never deal with or have a foolproof solution to non-tariff barriers. In Africa, is it Chinua Achebe? Once they have a saying which says, men have learned to shoot without missing, and the bird Ekene has learned to fly without landing. This applies also to issues of non-tariff barriers. Countries, nations will always come up with new ways and methods of evading or creating barriers which are not technical. And no matter how many laws we put in place, we're going to have this problem of non-tariff barriers. But most of the reasons why people are being protectionistic, you also highlighted the issue of patents and seed, monopolies on seed and whatever. I think we also have to be very fair with our innovators or people who have their intellectual property rights or copyrights. The world does not have a standard model of dealing with copyrights or intellectual property rights. Until and when we have a universal laws on dealing with intellectual and property rights, it is very difficult to deal with these matters. Why? Because you are an entrepreneur. You have come up with your new discovery. Before the advent of ICT, with that discovery, it had a proper product life cycle that can stretch over years, and you can recoup your investment. But with the advent of technology and its proliferation the world over, what happens is you invent something today, somebody re-engineers it in the next 2-3 days. It expires before it's even hit the markets, or it's that technology is even stolen. This is why innovators or some people are now protecting their seeds and so forth, so that they try and recoup their investment. But we believe we need a model where biotechnology or biotechnological improvement should be fashioned or tailored in a manner that the world will benefit, but at the same time ensuring that those innovators will also recoup what they would have what they would have put as throughput. I submit.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we are out of time. In fact, we're about 10 minutes over, but if our panelists don't have anywhere else to be, perhaps you can all engage with each other and speak. It's wonderful to have students that really are so interested in the subject matter. So if you do have time, it'd be great. I'd like to thank all three of you really so much for such a fascinating discussion and for being with us on this final day of the forum. I will leave the audience at your mercy, or you at their mercy, actually. And thank you again.
To Mr. Muzayaban.